to say can't come.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Chairman, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody, and appreciate everyone is busy, so this is a bit of time out of their diary. But welcome to this call-in meeting. I just want to make it very clear that although this was called in back in March, there was absolutely no criticism for the length of time it's taken to get to this point. Well, obviously with COVID, people working remotely, and also making sure that the most priority services are provided by Waverley took precedence over doing a call-in piece of work. So to Kelvin and Democratic Services and to Tamsin and everyone else, there is no criticism of that at all. Thank you for your attendance this morning. This is the call-in for Farnham Leisure Centre. If I just give a little bit of history of why it was called in, and then I'll hand over to Kelvin and Tamsin. This relates to a report that went to the executive on the 3rd of March 2020. And as you know, once a report goes to executive, there's a 5-day call-in period for any item to be scrutinised. Unfortunately, the dates of the community wellbeing were as such that this could not be scrutinised at all. And again, there's no criticism, or there's, we know it's not a deliberate action to avoid any scrutiny, but it's just unfortunate that it meant the document and the proposals could not be scrutinised unless they were called in. The committee as a whole discussed it, and we looked at what information was available for those decisions, and it was felt that the documents that were contained within that report of the 3rd of March were insufficient to actually understand why that decision was taken. So that's why it was called in. I mean, obviously, normally the cycle of meetings are as such that this wouldn't be a normal issue because we'd have scrutinised it prior to the decision. So again, it was just unfortunate. So that's why it was called in. I appreciate Councillor Foreshevsky was not part of the committee at the time, so hopefully that just gives a bit of meat to the bone on that one. So it was about the timing and the information contained. It was not about whether the decision was correct or not, it was about the process. Right, I've started off, but I think probably Kelvin, if you just want to give a bit of information, and then I'll open it up to the committee members to ask questions as they feel fit. Thank you, Kelvin.
Thank you, Chairman. Considering the timescales involved, we felt it might be useful just to do a quick presentation summarising the key points, so that it brought everyone up to the same point, and then allowing for sort of questions at the end. Are you comfortable with that approach? Okay, Fiona, if you could put the presentation up. I was going to start, Councillor Townsend, although not the portfolio holder at the time, will lead off, and then I'll come in with the further detail going forward. Over to you, Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Kelvin. Could you move on to the first slide, or the next slide, please, Fiona? Okay, as Kelvin said, I wasn't the portfolio holder at the time, but I obviously have read the different documents, and hopefully will be able to contribute to answering as many questions as I can. But obviously Kelvin and Tamsin will also be there to answer any questions as well. As people may or may not know, because some of the councillors are fairly new, Farnham Leisure Centre is managed by Places Leisure on our behalf. So, and they run all of our other leisure centres across the borough as well. So we have a management contract with them, and we have a management fee that is payable to Waverley, and we also do have a profit share arrangement as well with them if we exceed the targets. And up until now, it's been, a very successful and profitable arrangement. Obviously, the different services vary across the different centres within the borough, and this particular call-in is obviously focused on the Farnham Leisure Centre. We do rely, obviously, on Places Leisure and their vast industry knowledge, and to help us, to steer us to the optimal mix of facilities across the various sites. So that's the basic arrangement, and then if we move on to the next slide, I just want to say as well, I know that Kelvin's mentioned it as well, but I think it does warrant some mention that, as you can imagine at this time, you know, officers have been really, really busy and have been adapting to lots of new roles across the councils, none more so than my leisure team, who have obviously been helping with various different things, including Frensham Ponds. You know, they've been out there doing stints and had to bear, you know, the brunt of very challenging behaviour at Frensham, where the numbers of visitors there have been obviously massive. And I just want to acknowledge, you know, that they have been supporting our communities during this time, you know, with huge generosity and kindness, and that goes for councillors as well. You know, have been really busy, and within this as well, you know, the second wave, which was anticipated but has come along now as well. Although we know what we're kind of doing this time, and we know how we can produce the services and the support that our residents really need. I think that the additional workload needs to be acknowledged on officers and on councillors as well, and also, you know, having to cope with all that, as well as, you know, everyone's own personal lives as well. So I hope, you know, everyone will bear that in mind, how much stress and strain is on the services, on our services at this moment in time, and on people's, you know, worrying about families and friends as well. Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to pass on to Kelvin now, and he can explain the more detailed information. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. So let's going back to where this started in the paperwork. So in July 2018, the council approval was the following. So that was a capital budget of 3.22 million, and that was for Godalming and Farnham. Within that approval, as you can see, it delegated some authorities to talk through the detailed specification and the procurement, with subject to the negotiations with Places Leisure. The schemes were funded from different capital pots, but what was detailed within the exempt annex was, in essence, the investment was on the prerequisite of an increased management fee from Places Leisure. So what we happened is an investment in improved facilities. Then for that, they will get more users, and therefore we as a council should expect a return on our investment for that. So it was based on circa 100,000 a year per annum increased management fee. The reason for the proposed extension was detailed in the original report in July 2018, and it was based on the indoor leisure facilities strategy, which is a strategy that looks across all our indoor facilities and allows for, you know, the growth in housing numbers, of residents, and then for potential users into the future. And what they identified, PPP with the consultants at ours for the Farnham Leisure Centre, was a diversification in facility mix could be advantageous to usage, as there will be a greater demand within the area. And in that they referenced climate facilities were something that could be looked at, as well as indoor sort of children's facilities, soft play and the like. So what we were doing, and recommendation 3 was office would get delegated authority to negotiate the management fee for the terms of the contract, for the remaining part of the contract. For this investment, we would work an uplift in the management fee. If I go to the next slide, Fiona. So following the council approval, the proposals were further explored. Now, this is where the basis of the calling came in. So unfortunately, during that process, the contractor who supplies climate facilities for places in other contracts around the country, contacted us and places to inform that they were already had approved installations in Alton and Fleet, and therefore they work on a franchise arrangement, and felt that opening one in Farnham would dilute the user base, so therefore they would not support a climbing facility in Alton, Fleet and Farnham. So we continued to press this. Really, we were contacted around sort of 24th of May 2019, and we continued to challenge this all the way through to say, look, we think Farnham is a different offer into Alton and Fleet, and if you looked at the different locations of the sites, we do not feel that the area would be diluted and there'll be different users. Clip and Climb were very strict on that and did not accept that argument. And on the 11th of October, when they got planning approval for Fleet, they informed us that they would not support a climbing facility in Farnham. So this placed a challenge for us and Places Leisure. Obviously, as officers, we were negotiating a management fee uplift, and the return on investment that was agreed by council required the 100,000 uplift for Farnham. Therefore, we looked at new proposals to how we would achieve that 100,000 uplift and what changes would need to be made. So I go to the next slide. In essence, the next one was where we got to the 3rd of March. So the proposal came back that they felt that they could increase the soft play area and improve the number of parties, and that would increase a certain amount of income. But there was a gap, still a gap between the agreed 100,000 and what they thought an increased soft play would offer. They therefore proposed that they close the creche at Farnham to close that gap. In essence, the creche, and we carried out an equality impact assessment on the creche, usage had dropped considerably over the years. This is predominantly due to a change in customer behaviours. As I'm sure we all remember, the government brought in 30 hours free childcare that can be utilised by nurseries and childminder settings. And what was finding in the centre was there was a very limited usage of that creche, and the proposal from Places to ourselves was, with the closure of the creche in the extended soft play, they could serve that that group still, and then they would be able to offer the 100,000 uplift in management fee. At the time, Councillor Beeman was the portfolio holder. We reported this information to him, and he felt it was important that, although it was felt that there was a delegated authority that the officers could negotiate this change in facility mix, as long as the financial element was achieved, that there was this was put into the public domain so that people were aware of the decision making. Hence, on the 3rd of March, we took a report through explaining the changes from the clip and climb and soft play offering to an increased sort of soft play area, and the closure of the creche, reflecting the low usage. As part and parcel of that, we also included energy efficiency and carbon reduction opportunities to make sure they were explored as part and parcel of this agreement. So in essence, we took the feeling was we took the report in March is a way of being transparent about the decision making. So if I pass on to the last slide, I think it is. I think what's key to remember is the executive and administrator, we're still committed to investment in Farnham Leisure Centre. There's opportunities, but as I'm sure everyone on the committee is aware, leisure at the moment is services are in a precarious position. We're currently in lockdown 2, so that's involved the closing of all leisure centres. So therefore, we took a report through to executive on the 8th of September this year that deferred any planned investment, future investment in Farnham Leisure Centre to coincide perhaps after the COVID pandemic, so that we can ascertain the impact of that on a service delivery, and also to remember that our leisure management contract runs out in 2023, at the end of June 2023. So it was felt that that would be an appropriate time perhaps to return to looking at what facility mix of investment could be made in Farnham Leisure Centre. So at the moment they're closed and the investment is put on hold. I know the call-in is to look at the process. I hope that that sort of quick presentation explained the steps that we went through, and obviously my final slide will say we're now obviously as officers happy to answer any questions that the committee have.
Okay, thank you, Kelvin. Thank you for sharing that screen. Okay, I'll open it up to the committee members before I come out with any points myself. So if people either put the hand up or use the hand. So Jenny, Councillor Else.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't know how to put my hand up automatically on this. I'd just like to know, it was a surprise to me to see that for example, the climbing wall had been dropped, and I would like to know, and it was also a surprise to me to read that the contractor seemed to be in control of whether Waverley could put a climbing wall into the centre, Farnham Centre, or not. And I wonder whether other contractors were actually approached, or whether Clip and Climb was the only one. And is there any connection, and forgive me for asking this, between Clip and Climb and Places for Leisure? Because I know Places for Leisure do have their own Clip and Climb company or organisation or branch, whatever you want to call it. But I'm just a little bit foggy about how the climbing wall actually came to be dropped from the plan in the first place. And another question, if I may.
Yeah.
Is that all right, Chairman? I questioned the minimal impact on the loss of the creche in 2018. And yet in the presentation we just heard, it sort of almost indicates that this is a very recent decision. The creche was actually left out of the whole plan in 2018, and I questioned the minimal impact then, and I think I still question it, even if it isn't used by very many people. It's a very essential facility for young mothers who want to engage in leisure activities at our centres. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Jenny, Councillor Else. So if I take the questions as you ask them. So Clip and Climb, no, there is no business relationship between Clip and Climb and Places Leisure. They are two separate companies, but what there is a relationship where the original proposal, when we went to Places about the extension, they always had Clip and Climb as the franchisee that they wanted to use. So it's a successful sort of commercial operation and commercial operator that they've used across a number of contracts. So what they felt was, if their sort of trusted partner didn't feel that there was a market or a significant market to sustain a climbing facility in Farnham Leisure Centre, that they should listen to that, and they would not commit to the uplift in management fee that we were requiring as part of our investment. So they basically lent on the expertise of their Clip and Climb colleagues, the people they've worked with before, to say, you will be diluting the market if you open one in Farnham. Now, that was the key challenge we put back to Clip and Climb on numerous occasions, and we didn't accept that. We felt there was a very different market, but they were very strong in their belief that it would dilute the market. So what we then had the decision on is whether we moved forward with a climbing facility, which we could still have pushed, absolutely, Councillor Else. We weren't completely in the sort of hands of Places and Clip and Climb. You could have moved forward with a different climbing facility, But for that, we would have had less of a financial return because the business risk they felt would be greater, and therefore they would not be able to offer the uplift in management fee. So then they came back after discussions with the counter proposal that we took to the 3rd of March, which included an improved soft play and the closure of the creche. I hope that is clear, but I'm happy to come back on that. The minimal impact, it's definitely a challenge with the creche. It's something that as contract, we monitor the contract, obviously, and Tams and I as client have always pushed for the creches to remain open, and we feel it's an important service. But it is clear when we looked at it in detail how usage had dropped. And we must remember it is a way of letting parents still exercise. But what we were finding is obviously there's a cost to run the creche. So there was a payment on top of membership. So if you wanted to, say, do a group fitness class, you would have your membership, but you would pay an additional sum on top of that. And I think what basically we'd found through Places Leisure had found is once you started adding on the cost of creches, it almost became uncompetitive to do that. People would then go perhaps even to more expensive clubs such as a Virgin or a David Lloyd, because actually that's included within the membership. So it was a challenging decision. I think that was one of the big reasons that Councillor Beeman particularly felt that we should bring the report forward into the member arena so that they understood the reasoning behind the closure of the creche. So basically, it's always been a struggle to keep the creches sort of a break even, and it's been a challenge, but we felt that it was an important service. But when you started looking over time, the numbers were extremely minimal. I think, and Tamsin will correct me if I'm wrong, I think we almost had sort of 3 or 4 regular users in that, and that was pretty much it. So that was why it was deemed a minimal impact on the contract. Hopefully that answers your questions, Councillor Elson, the reasoning behind the decisions.
Councillor Elson, satisfied you, or do you want to?
Well, not really, but I mean, you're saying that's why you did it, but I'm wanting to sort of understand that you maximised every opportunity to actually carry on with the original plan, and
Yes.
I'm not really hearing that you did, but that's as it was, and that was my question, and that's your answer. So
well, my apologies, Councillor Elson. Yeah, we were definitely committed to a climbing facility at 100%. So over the 6-month period from sort of May, when we first were talking to Clip and Climb, and before we even input Places Leisure in or our contract management in, we were challenging them, and there were numerous challenges back, phone calls, we chased emails, we went to the boss, went to the owner. I can assure you, we felt that the climbing facility would work, but we were left with the option of a reduced return on our investment or an alternative option. And it was felt after talking to Places that the alternative offer was the best for Waverley residents. That was where it came down to. So I hope the report, my apologies if that wasn't clear, but we did fight very hard for a climbing facility. I share your views that I thought that would be quite a statement thing for the building. I thought it would be really well used. However, commercially, the argument was that they would not give the uplift in the Clip and Climb, would not support that offering.
Okay, Councillor,
Chairman, do you mind if I just have one last word on there?
And then I'll go to Councillor Rabini.
And that is that you say you did everything, but I don't think everything was done, because everything would have included seeking another opinion from another professional organisation that provided Clip and Climb. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rabini, you very patiently have had your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, a couple of questions, because I was obviously one of those that called it in. I think actually Councillor Else has said many things that I wanted to say. However, it was her last point that I wanted to bring up. I don't know the relationships between you and the management company. However, I would have thought it was prudent in the process to have gone to another Clip and Climb type company just to reinforce that what the management company was saying were correct. I know there are legal contracts, I know there's relationships about the uplift, etc., etc. However, I would have liked to see a simple statement from another company just stating that Clip and Climb they used were correct in their costing, or in fact there was an alternative way. Now, I would have then thought we could have taken that to the management company and said there is alternatives that would benefit those in farm, because I'm not convinced that we share the same audience with Alton and Fleet, and that we might have been able to provide this facility. Now, my second part is on the creche, and again, a lot of what Councillor Allister said I agree with. My main point when I read this is on page 28, where it says, in fact, under item 14, consultation, due to the very small number of customers utilising the service, consultation was not considered. Now, as far as I'm concerned, whenever users use it, however many small that is, surely they have ideas as to what they would either like to see bettered, or indeed what's wrong with the facility. So not to talk to the actual users, I find it is wrong. I would have hoped that some ideas or constructive ideas could have come out of it. Now, most of the blame seems to go on the fact that the government are offering this money for outside. I obviously believe that we're not trying to build a creche on its own for outsiders not using the club. And I've now heard your argument about the costings going on to membership, therefore making it not cost effective. However, I would like some sort of answer as to why we didn't actually make the customers consultation. I would certainly want to see again that bit of document. Thank you.
Okay.
Shall I come in, Chairman?
Come back to, yeah, and then I think
Yeah.
Councillor Townsend did have a hand up. I'm not sure if it was to clarify something, so I'll go to you after, Liz.
Councillor Dixon has also had her hand up right from the beginning, Chair.
All right, my apologies. So if I go to Kelvin first and then Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, sorry.
And then Councillor Townsend, if there's anything you want to, before I've got some
2 minutes. Somebody's at the door. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Yep, that's
okay. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Rubini. Some very valid points regarding climbing, a different climbing offer. What we must remember, what I probably should elaborate on, is Clip and Climb is more than just a climbing wall. It's actually quite a unique offering that basically brings young climbers in to the climbing sort of offer. So it's based around very different obstacles. It's like even sort of mugs, cups, sort of different things that are built up to create a fun sort of climbing offer. So it's about bringing in sort of very young people interested in climbing, and then eventually leading to a wall that is what was part and parcel of it. So in the discussions, it was felt that the management fee was based around that type of unique offering. So therefore, yes, you could move forward with a climbing wall, and less interactive arrangement. But the view from places was they would do that, but they did not feel that would give them the commercial return that they had indicated by using that unique climbing offer, the Clip and Climb offer. I take on board the point for the report. There could potentially have gone to another contractor to look at potential offers. We did look at some other virtual ones, but yes, we could have probably put that into the report to make it clear that that was considered. With regard to the creche and the consultation, we didn't consult directly with the users. They were all, there's ongoing as part of the contract user surveys, and we knew that the people that use the service were happy with it. It is a service. The creche is only open 2.5 hours a day. It is only for users of the leisure centre, so there is no external usage. It's for people coming to the centre who have children up to preschool age that want to use the facility. So it was quite a restricted usage. It's only 2.5 hours. Otherwise, you enter into far greater regulation. So that's all that's ever offered in all of our sites. So it was felt that we knew that they were supportive of it it was understanding from the consultation whether others would be interested in using it and improving the numbers. So I hope that just explains the process we went through.
Councillor Bean, do you want to come back at all?
Yes, please, if I could. Thank you for that. And can I say, which I didn't say at the beginning, which I should have done, I think it's an exciting project. I love the idea of the climate change, etc. And I thank the officers for all the hard work they've done in getting it to this stage. However, coming back on creche, I am concerned. You just mentioned that you have this facility at the other leisure centres.
Yeah.
Why is Farnham not working, whereas the others are working? Is there a link? I mean, do they do things differently? I would be interested to see any sort of, again, any documentation or answers on that.
Thank you, Councillor Breen. If we're honest, the other leisure centres, probably the most successful one is at Hazelmere. But the reality is I think when we looked at Farnham, I think there's just a greater competitive environment in Farnham that impacts the creche usage. So I'll quote a figure, but my colleague Tamsin will probably be able to give more detail. But I think there's circa 13 different leisure offerings, that's health and fitness, in and around the Farnham area that doesn't exist in other areas in the borough. So it means that it exasperates the usage of the creche, because there are other offerings where users can go that offer that facility, and perhaps different facilities. So I think they just have an even less of a usage because of the competition in the area.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Dixon. Apologies, I didn't see you. That's the problem with the screen. I didn't see you put your hand up.
Okay, that's fine. So just on the climbing wall, my kids are close enough to that age that I do remember in 2018 they were very fashionable, but there's lots of options. I mean, we used to drive Farnborough's got a really big one. I mean, that's where we used to mostly go, and the reason why we went there was I think we also had swimming lessons in Farnborough, so we used to end up going there. And the other one, the big destination one, was the one in Guildford. That's where we always ended up for the children's parties with the climbing wall.
Yeah.
But I think the thing was, we were going to have to come up with something pretty special to compete in the marketplace for that facility. And I do wonder whether or not that's a bit passé now. I know, but obviously I don't know enough about the business cases to know that. I have seen the one in Fleet. It's now open, but it hasn't been open. Obviously, it's in the centre of the shopping centre, in next to Waitrose up there. Looks very sad at the moment. Right. So that being said, let's just go back to as I understand it. Obviously, I haven't been here for the whole life cycle of this thing, but so we, as a council, Waverley Borough Council, said we were going to spend 3.2 million to extend the leisure centres at both Farnham and Godalming. And generally the feeling was felt that, okay, Brightwells had been approved at that point and Woolmead had been approved, and it was felt that we'd need slightly better. I have seen pictures of this where the leisure centre looks all polished and shining in amidst the brand new Brightwells Centre, and that all feels good. But then subsequently, but then during the COVID thing, the 3.2 million has now been set aside and will not be invested into either Farnham or Godalming leisure centres. I think my question is, am I going to leave that decision now till 2023 when the contract with the leisure centre comes up? I think that's a bit of a pity, because Brightwells is going to be open and in very soon, we hope, and it would be pity if we haven't, upgraded our leisure centre. I know this sounds ridiculous because I know we haven't got any money, but it would have given this leisure centre a real shot in the arm and a real boost to come out of this COVID recession with a jump in its stride, or whatever the phrase is, and really come back fighting. So can we, do we have to wait till 2023 to put money into this leisure centre? I think that's my question. Have I got the sequence of events correct?
Can I just And thank you, Councillor Dixon. And a lot of the points you say, I totally understand. But this is about a calling process, about the process of getting to the decision. It's not about whether the decision was right or wrong, whether financially now we can actually make those improvements or not. We have to try and focus this meeting on, did the executive, when they supported that decision, did they have the information available to look at the options and some of the points that have been made to be absolutely 100% that that was the correct decision to make, and therefore the process was correct. Whether the decision could be correct, but going through an incorrect process, it's irrelevant. We have to try and concentrate on the process of that executive report on the 3rd of March. So though I absolutely understand your point, and I would love either Liz or Paul Follows to say, yes, well, once we're out of COVID, we'll find all this money. I think that's, I would suggest that's dangerous territory for them in such an unknown world, but this is the wrong process to do that. It should be either full council or an O&S. That's an O&S. So my apologies for cutting you off, but I don't want to divert into something that's not really what we're here for today.
The two questions we're trying to answer is, did they have the right information to make a decision on the climbing wall, and did they have the right information to make the information on the soft play area? It is about the process that they've gone through. Maybe if I know Councillor Campbell's in, I don't know whether you want to come in now, but I've got a couple of questions, so I don't know. Okay, if you come in now, then I'll ask my questions.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to add a bit from a point of view of, obviously I've looked at the documentation and just my view on a couple of things from looking at that. With regards to the creche, I totally appreciate what Jenny's saying, and it is it's lovely to be able to provide that service, but we do have to rely on Places for Leisure. They're providing the service, and they want to make a profit, and they want to run things well. So if a company thought that in maintaining that facility they could attract a load more members, then I can assure you that they would have kept it on. It was, as Kelvin said earlier, about 4.5, if you can have half a person using it per day, and that was at 15% capacity. So it really wasn't being used, and Places for Leisure would have wanted to attract more people. If they thought they could have taken advantage of that facility, they definitely would have. So I just want to just reiterate that we are reliant on, we get a management fee for this. The contract and the mix of the different facilities are really, in consultation, obviously, but Places for Leisure are the experts in this field. Places Leisure are the experts in this field. And as our Click and Climb, and with the Click and Climb, I looked back at the July 2018 reports, and it was obvious there that the Click and Climb facility was more expensive to run than the soft play. So although we might be losing a Click and Climb, we are extending the soft play, which also was providing a facility to those young families. So instead of perhaps providing a creche, we were still dealing with that demographic. We were still providing facilities for those young families and young children. And I don't think we need to get too hung up on the Click and Climb. Although it was a lovely facility, we were looking at providing an extended play area, and that extended play area was going to provide soft play area, was going to provide more facilities. It was also going to provide, when you look at the costs of, which obviously I won't mention the cost because it was, it's commercially sensitive, but when you look at the costs of the soft play compared to the operating costs of the Click and Climb, the soft play is less. So although the Click and Climb was forecasted to bring in more money, when you balance up the two, the operational costs and the money, we are looking at a return, the similar return to Waverley Borough Council, and still providing an excellent facility soft play facility, which would be really exciting and great for young families. So although the click and climb sounds wonderful and it sounds great, let's not get carried away with the fact that we were still providing extended facilities for young families and for children in an exciting environment, and we were still going to get our management fee back. So I just want to say that, you know, we do have to rely on what the market, as in Places Leisure and Click and Climb, are prepared to provide in this very competitive market. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Liz. I'm not so worried about whether it's Click and Climb or whatever. The process is about, was the information available when that decision was taken? I'm just going to throw a couple of points in. Just one's more of a statement because it reaffirms points previously made. If you look at the quality impact assessment, it says negative impact on limited customers and on those who have no other means of childcare and who will no longer be able to attend classes or activities at the centre. Now, I do think, whatever we say, that is disappointing that we had identified. Does it matter whether it's 4 or 40? There are people who can have a negative impact and they have not been consulted, they have not been informed, and in fact the first time they'll be told will be after the decision's been made. I think that was a poor decision not to communicate. We say that we're communicating council, and we should be, and I think we didn't get it right on that occasion. What the points I want to do is, rather than whether it should be climate frame or whatever, when I looked at the report, the executive report on the 3rd of March, which is our pages 9 till 13, and there was obviously, in addition to that, there's one other document, which is the Equality Impact Assessment. What isn't available, and I still haven't seen, so in March, when that decision was taken that the money was going to be put for soft play, but I think it was also the cafe and some management space, I have never seen, where is the business case for that? Where is the justification for that? Because that was the information that the committee felt that the executive should have had in March. What is the risks? What's the financial appraisals? What alternative options were put forward and considered? What was the business plan? Because at the end of the day, I think it was 1.15 million investment for that particular project. There doesn't seem to be any documentation produced prior to the 3rd of March, nor produced to the executive, which made that decision a reasoned and well-reasoned and judged decision. And I still haven't had it. If there is a report dated prior to the 3rd of March, which says all of that information, then if that information was produced to the executive, which it doesn't appear it has been, that was the point of the call-in. I think this, whether it's a climbing frame or not, I think it's fairly irrelevant. The paperwork and the justification, the business case, the financial appraisals, the SWOT analysis does not seem to have been done. And unless Kelvin has those documents that he can share, I don't think that information was available to the executive.
Can I come back, Chairman?
Yeah, of course you can.
Oh, yeah. So what we've tried to explain, the business case, our business case was set out in the exempt annex in July 2018, and it's a very simple business case for Waverley Borough Council to consider, and that is, we put 1.1 million in. What improvement in management fee will we get guaranteed by Places Leisure? We've put the commercial and business risk always with Places Leisure. So the original authority was based on a business case of our investment of X million based with Section 106 and other funding, and a return always based on the return from Places Leisure will guarantee us. So we are not running those centres, so I would not carry out the detailed SWOT analysis that you're referring to, Councillor Deans, because that is not me taking a risk. If we were running those centres, to make that decision, I would have brought that to executive. What our business is based on is we are saying we will invest this much places, but we will only do that if you give us X amount return in increased guaranteed management fee. So they have to, so basically that commercial risk and business risk is placed with them. So the way I would respond is, for the council, the decision is, Kelvin, have you managed to get the business case that was set out in the exempt annex that said you would get X amount uplift in management fee for this investment? Because if they failed, if that soft play failed and it didn't get the user numbers in, Waverley would not be, Waverley would still benefit from the 100,000 management fee because it's a guaranteed return. So that's all we based. That is the business case that we would look at as a council. I hope that makes sense. So the commercial risk sits with Places Leisure. Right,
but let's get our figures. So there's a risk of 1.15 million, which is our investment.
Yep.
It's £100,000 uplift, but we've only got a 3-year contract before that contract's over. So there is a financial risk because that is only £300,000 against our investment of 1.15 if we went to another provider.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's what comes back to the original paper in July, where we'd already gone out to consultant support, SLC. If we remember, there's a significant report that sat behind that first decision that explained that we would be expecting to have an even greater uplift if once we go out to tender. So yes, there is a risk in the sense of the timescales of the business, but we had expert opinion to say facilities of that ilk would give us an increased uplift when we go out to tender. So that was the 3rd of March was almost an addition to what was already, that was a change to what was agreed in July 2018, but there was still the guaranteed uplift. So there was more information in the original one from SLC to say, yes, you'll get 100,000 now or whatever, but you will, looking at the market, get an increase even when you go out to tender if you've invested in the facilities.
But it doesn't. So
it's not guaranteed, but it's stated. It's basically from experts in the industry to say, if you put investment in of that, you would get an improved management fee over and above what places are offering at this moment.
Okay, and they're aware of what our investment was and what was the proposals?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't think we've got that document at all.
Okay, we can circulate that round to Councillor.
Okay, because I was looking at my papers, I didn't see if anybody had their hands up. I don't know if Jerry's got his hand up or just moving the screen.
Nobody's indicating, Chairman.
Okay.
I think Councillor Hyman has his hand up.
Councillor Hyman.
Sorry, yeah, you can hear me now, I'm sure. Yes, I was chairman of the environment, community O&S, but back when we did a review of the leisure centres. I think it started in 2017 and ran through to 2018 or something like that. So I got quite a lot of background knowledge in this and the improvements that we were doing. And I felt, in fact, I think at the March, correct me if I'm wrong, Kelvin, at the March executive meeting that's in question, I think I was the only person to speak on this item, was I not? Is that right? Do I remember correctly?
Councillor Hyman, I would need to probably revert to my colleagues in Democratic Services to remember that. Quite possibly, yes, but I can't remember.
I think I was the only person to speak to. I don't know why. You see, I researched this last week. I went through the papers. I went through it in depth. I went to the webcast. I watched the webcast again, and for some reason, my head seems to be full of cotton wool today, and I don't seem to be able to remember anything. And I just feel confused because I knew exactly the points I was going to make, and now I'm just trying to bring them back again. And it could be because I'm not a morning person, and that my brain can't cope with the fact that I thought it had gone back to being a 10 o'clock start, and I'm still confused about that. Because when I joined, it seemed to have been going on for ages. But my apologies. Let's get on because we've got an 11 o'clock break. I was, at the time, I'm quite sure last March, my concern was that we were spending money for the sake of it, that we'd agreed to spend a load of money in 2018, and that because the climbing wall was no longer available, we were going to be spending that money anyway, even though we were not going to be getting the climbing wall. So we were looking for other things to spend it on. And I think that's pretty much what I said at the time, but I may have said it better or worse, I don't know. And my other concern, I remember, was whether the information was good in terms of the monopoly, we were given information. I don't know whether it was 2 years ago, a year ago, or whatever, but we were given information that the climbing wall, we'd lost it because we hadn't been quick enough and they'd sold it to someone else. Now, I know we were told that. Is that the case? And then the story changed a bit later. And it became that, no, actually, the manufacturers had sold one to Fleet in the meantime and sold one to Alton as well, and had decided that they were not going to sell one to us because that would water down their offer too much. And I remember thinking at the time, because I've been in business since I left university, I've never had a job, unemployable, obviously. My instant reaction was that they would not do that, that the manufacturers would not decide they're not going to sell us one of these climbing walls, which is, not an ongoing item. It's a capital item they would make money off of. They wouldn't refuse to do it. They wouldn't mind having 3 in the area. They wouldn't be giving people a monopoly on it or whatever. So I simply didn't really believe the reasons that I was given at the time. I'm not sure what we're being told now, but on that, I really want to know what the situation really was in respect of what happened, because what the situation really was affects whether the decision making was good and whether we came at it from the right angle. Can you just clarify that before I finish my point? I've got another thing to raise, but what actually happened with this firm, and bearing in mind that I can look up their name from months ago and phone them up and ask.
So there is somewhat of a timing situation. So when we spoke to them back in July, they made a commitment to places that they would be interested in coming in at Farnham. However, subsequent to that, Fleet and Alton obviously had agreements as well, and they came online. They received planning permission earlier, and they made a commitment to them as well. So therefore, they felt opening in Farnham would dilute that marketplace. So in essence, it was a timing. There was an original commitment in July, and I believe, I'd have to recheck my emails. At that time, one of those, either Alton or Fleet, weren't part of that discussion or commitment to us. But what happened is they came on board a faster rate than the Farnham Leisure Centre scheme. So therefore, it felt diluted, and they wouldn't offer it to Farnham. With regard to why it matters, so whereas we get a guaranteed fee from Places Leisure to run our leisure centres, what Clip and Climb would have to agree with Places Leisure is they would in essence have run that facility, so they would have given a guaranteed payment to Places to back, so it was almost a separate arrangement because they were the experts for climbing. So my assumption, and when we talked to them, it seemed clear they could not commit to that agreement with Places Leisure because there was more competition in the area now, and they would not be able to offer that payment to run the facilities at Farnham. I hope that makes sense.
Okay. Oh, God. Sorry.
Chairman, can I just add something at this stage before Jerry carries on, just to add some clarity to that? It is in the July 2018 report on point 17, when the actual decision was made, it did say, it is important to note, however, that the position is not fully agreed, and further negotiations with what was then PFP, which are now Places Leisure, obviously, will have to take place before proceeding with any investment. So it was very clear in the report in July that although this was the aspiration, and you know, the council was considering the proposed extension of the Farnham Leisure Centre, it was very clear that more negotiation and more information had to come forward before that decision could be finalised. So I just wanted to add that point before we go forward. Thank you for allowing me to interrupt, Chairman.
That's all right, and absolutely I understand what you're saying, but I think the point that's been made is we have never seen this more information. We've never seen the justification of what the new things are going to bring. So you said there's going to be more information coming. Where is that? And was that present on the 3rd of March? Because it doesn't appear so from the papers. Councillor Hyman, do you want to come back to your questions? I don't want to.
Thanks very much indeed. Yes, Chairman, and I agree. I think you're making the right point there. I'm very happy with what Kelvin's explained to me there. Obviously it makes sense that if they are operating it, then they are going to. I didn't realise it was a climbing wall that needed to have the manufacturer there 100% of the time that it's. I mean, to me, it sounds very, very difficult to. It sounds a strange situation. It doesn't sound entirely right, but nevertheless, that is an explanation which I think I can accept there. But what it tells me, the situation we're in now tells me that because what we're being told, I think now is that would not be viable. It tells me that the 2018 decision was that was made by the council was wrong. On a very simple level, that if a decision was made at the time based on certain assumptions, and those assumptions have turned out now, with the wonderful benefit of hindsight, it would have been bad if it had gone ahead, if we'd gone ahead with it, as it would no longer be viable, and we wouldn't be able to get the management fee out. But I'm wondering. Is the increased management fee lost with the decision not to proceed with the investment plan? I mean, we're not going to be getting that management fee, are we? That's scrapped, presumably, the increase?
Yeah, that's correct. The increase relates to an investment, but obviously we've now, there's a whole different financial arrangement at present. Absolutely. As a result of COVID.
We're not going to get anything, are we?
No, and we wouldn't, and that's why now would not be the appropriate time to invest, because places would not be able to guarantee any management fee uplift. So no, we're not getting the increased management fee because we haven't made the investment.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, it's COVID, but we've been proven that the decision making all along actually has been wrong, because none of this would have come off in the end. Perhaps that certainly says that we need to consider the what could happen. What's the worst case scenario sort of situation. A lot better in decision making. It's something which I've always pressed the council for over many years, that we look at what could happen, what could go wrong, particularly in large investments, and more with property investment situation actually than in the leisure centre, because we're dealing a lot bigger money. But nevertheless, I think it does say that we do have to have our eyes open all the time to the worst case scenario when we are making our decisions. And I think that's something that could be learned, but sometimes it does take a major disaster or whatever to get it through to people. It happened to me when I lost my property and everything I'd worked for 20 years in the 92 collapse. Other people didn't go through that, and I suffered many years for it. So I do know from the School of Hard Knocks that things can go wrong horribly through no fault of oneself, outside things that you just never would have forecast. Okay, I'm quite happy with what I got there. I am certainly with the chairman on the level of, did we have the right amount of information available? I'm just wondering, what's actually is the chairman looking to see? What results does he want? Where are we headed with the vote now on this in terms of what restitution or what are we going to learn from this? That's what I'm really interested in, because I don't think there's any point, any big question of fraud or misconduct or anything like that involved in this. It's not that sort of issue, I don't think. But where's he headed, and what are we looking to get as an admission or an apology or where are we going now? Can we sum it up? Is that possible?
Okay, Simon, I wouldn't quite put it in the words. I wouldn't put it in the words that you have. This is not about asking for an apology. This is not about getting someone to say they've done something wrong. This is just about a process, which is the role of overview and scrutiny. It's not what I want. It's actually what the committee feels is the correct course of action. And often, we have talked a lot about business risks and everything else. What we haven't been shown is what was the evidence when you look at the strategy, indoor leisure strategy to enhance. It says it's based on identified strategic need. We haven't seen that. So it's not about proportioning blame. It's about making sure that the decision's process was correct. I think probably the decision may well have been right, and is fairly irrelevant now anyway. But it's about, on the 3rd of March, did the executive have all the business information they needed to invest £1.15 million? I haven't seen that yet. I'm not sure what the SLC document will provide in addition to what's been said. So I think that's where we are. Now, when you look at the potential recommendations, if you've got your agenda papers, there is 4 that's been put out. Now, the first one is to resolve not to refer decision back to the executive. Second is resolve not to refer decision back to the executive, but nevertheless to make such recommendations to the executive as it sees fit. To resolve to refer the decision to the executive to reconsideration with a written explanation setting out the nature of the committee's concerns. And 4, to resolve to refer the matter to full council as it's felt that the decision is contrary to the council's budget and policy framework. Well, my suggestion to the committee members here that 4 would not be an appropriate response. It's as using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Number 3 is to resolve it to the executive reconsideration with a written explanation. My suggestion would be that actually the decision is probably right and is even more being confirmed. So we're putting work to reconsider something that's actually not going to happen in the current climate. That to me would be not the appropriate and be unfair on the executive to do that, which probably leaves 1 or 2 is either not to refer it back or not to refer it back to the executive, but to make such recommendations to the executive as it sees fit. Now, to me, I think 2 things have been raised, and I think we've got the deputy leader here as well as a member of the executive. Is 1, there was an element of disappointment about the communication with the users of the creche who we'd identified were being put at risk and had no alternative. With those small numbers, it would have been easy to have spoken to them and just see whether we could help them, whether there's anything we could do as a council, whether we could signpost them to somewhere else. That was an easy win. So I don't need to say much more than that. And I think most people, and please shout if you disagree, that the report of the 3rd of March and the information that the executive have on that date probably could have had a little bit more information about the risks, the options, a little bit more about discussions with about the climbing frame, the lack of alternative options, and actually the fact it just seems to be a business decision, just about 100,000, and nothing else is important. But actually, in community wellbeing, we do a lot of functions actually that cost us money. The benefit is health. So there's no financial one. And this has been very much based, in my view, on the £100,000, therefore we can leave it to them to get on with. Now, actually, we should have been involved because it affects the health and well-being of our community to make sure we get that right. I still don't know, out of that 1.15, how much of that was for the increased office space, which has got absolutely no benefit to the community. How much was for the creche? How much was for the cafe? None of that information has ever been published. I mean, we can go around in circles about some of these issues. So my view is, I think we've made the points to the executive of they should have had some more information, maybe some more options, and they should have done a bit of consultation, or places for people have done more consultation with those who potentially could be vulnerable. I'm opening up, that's my initial views, open it up for other people to chip in. Councillor Mirrlees, sorry, you're next.
Well, I'd like to support you on that. I think that there are gaps, and it is our job to look at those things, and that is what we're here for. So I agree with you. I don't agree with it needing to go to council or anything like that, but particularly on the concept of community and well-being, you're right. It isn't simply about money. It is about the well-being of the people that we represent. And one of the things I felt that was lacking was, I don't remember anybody telling me that they perhaps talked to the management of places for leisure as to whether they could perhaps say, look, for people who want to bring their children to the creche, we will give you a reduced membership. Because sometimes when you reduce a membership and you're not asking for extra money, you get more people coming in, and that makes up the numbers. So I feel that was quite important, and that was something that possibly could have been looked at. But I would agree with you. I think number 2 is the thing that we should go for. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Else, any additional views? Sorry, Councillor Hyman, did you have your hand up? Sorry.
Sorry, did Councillor Else want to come in? I hadn't seen whether, I didn't want to tread on any toes.
No, you go next.
Okay, I just wanted to add actually one thing which is relevant at this. Firstly, is that the main reason that I spoke at that meeting that's in question was that I had been waiting for some years. When I first became a councillor about 2016 and then 2017, I was dealing with one of our countryside and recreation officers. And we had been trying to get improvements to the skate park, very small amount, 15 grand or so, which was, and I'd explained at that meeting, and it's on the webcast, anyone's welcome to go to it and see, but basically it's just a small concrete extension that would make the kids' life a lot easier, a wider area of standing where the BMX bikes sort of bowl is. And the grind on there, which at the moment is square. It would be much better if it was round and far more usable. Very few people use it because it's square and not easy to use and not much fun. But mainly to be able to put lights in. The lighting system, the underground cables were all put in and everything years ago. But the lamp stands have never been put in, and it means that during the winter, during these months now, when it's starting to get dark, but especially as it gets dark at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the kids are at home playing on their computers or whatever because they can't be down at the park. So,
excuse me, Councillor Hyman, that isn't part of the decision that the committee is here to.
No, absolutely, but
you're a bit off topic there. It was never an option for that money, in that context of that executive decision to be used for that purpose.
No, absolutely. I take on board what you're saying, and I'm not putting that forward now as saying that it is something to do with this decision. I'm saying that the 20th that at that meeting, that was the main concern, and but that does it is leading to where I see this, because I'm not looking at this decision. What we're doing now as being a criticism of the executive in any way, certainly not the portfolio holder, who wasn't the portfolio holder at the time anyway. It's certainly not a criticism of the officers either, because what we're really saying, I think, or the way I'm looking at it is our system right? Because with hindsight now, we're identifying ways that things could have been done better. And that decisions that were taken years ago and in March perhaps were not the right reasons. It's been proven now they were not the right reasons, because we weren't our decision-making systems weren't right. Effectively what we're saying is that we now know the information that we would expect to have had back then. It's easy for us to see it. And that information wasn't available. I agree with the chairman in that respect. It's a very point that I've been making for quite some time in respect to the decisions we've got, and was it Article 13 of our Constitution, in terms of the information we're required to make good decisions. So I'm absolutely in favour there, but I really want it to be, if we're putting something through to the executive, to be made clear that it isn't a criticism, it's hindsight. The decision-making system needs to be improved, and that, of course, is something where we have to support and do the right thing at audit and standards, in order to be able to put the better decision-making into place. Just that, really simply saying this. What this shows is that we really do need to make changes to our decision-making system.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm sure people watching this will see that not once have I nor anybody else made any criticism of either the officers, democratic services, or the executive, because that's not what this is about. This was just, was that decision made with the best information available? And I don't think it was, but I'm sure there are other decisions we've all been involved in where the same. But as a scrutiny role, we were asked to look at this, or we had to look at this, and we've done our role. And I think the reason why it was raised, Fiona, is because in Councillor Councillor Follows mentioned why that question in the chat. So I think it was about why that suddenly popped up, because I was looking at thinking, I'm a bit confused here, so I do understand why it was mentioned. Councillor Elsa, I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. I just got a thing in the back of my head. It is a question, but it's also an observation. Energy efficiency wasn't so high profile when the original decision was made to spend this money on the leisure centres. It's very high on the list now. I'm just interested to know when this matter was included within the rationale. I'm just interested to understand that. Thank you.
Kelvin, you're probably the best one to answer that one.
I think it was a combined sort of investment that achieved the increased management fee in essence. So we felt that energy efficiency was another opportunity that could be explored as part of this proposal. That was why it was included as part of this report. When?
When?
So I'll have to refer back. Energy efficiency has always been an important part of running our centres, trying to reduce the energy usage, but this obviously became more important when it became part of the administration's commitment to sustainability. So I think that was why it was included in the 3rd of March.
Okay, I'm just conscious of the time because we want to finish a few minutes before 11, or at least adjourn. I want the views, actually, if I can, of Councillor Foraszewski and Councillor Dixon about the recommendations, if they have any strong views. So, Councillor Foraszewski.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I completely agree with what you were saying and the recommendations. I think a lot of them there are completely unnecessary. I know more now than I did. As I say, I wasn't part of this committee before, so thank you for your explanation. But it seems clear to me now that obviously there is no criticism of anybody or anyone. It is just a matter of going forward now, how we actually put it right and how we do not make the same mistakes again. So when we talk so much about process and how important process is, we need to know that process is always in place. So my question is about how. How do we make sure that going forward the process is there to enable us? Because we can keep saying this time and time again, we didn't have the information, we haven't got the information, we haven't got this, we can't make decisions based on lack of information. But going forward, how, what sort of policy, what sort of scrutiny, what do we need to ensure that we have in place to make sure that we have everything in there? What is it? Is it a document? Is it what actually is it? So my question is, going forward, I agree with your recommendation, but how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? What process are we going to come up with to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Thank you, Chairman.
No, I think that's a very valid point, because we don't want to be called in. This is the first thing to be called in for donkey's years, and we really don't want others to be called in. I think that's a matter for maybe the executive to consider, and then for the council just to make sure. It's difficult because it's the what ifs, and it's very easy to pick apart something, the what ifs. I accept that, but it's been in a position it's taken 6 months. And I'm finding out about documents today that may help or may not help that I haven't had sighting of. So, I think we've just got to be a little bit sharper on what we consider, have a good, these are the documents that we've considered. You're absolutely right. I don't think it's a discussion for now, but I think it's a point well raised. Councillor Dixon, have you got any views or preferences on the recommendations? There are obviously 2.
Yeah. I think I agree with you that the fact that they were going to close the creche without consulting the users, even if there was only 4 users, and those ladies were going to turn up and they probably had memberships with their child and they find the creche closed, was yeah, we could have done more consultation there, I think. Yeah. I think I agree with you. That was that could have, we could have done it. We should have done more there, particularly for that group, I think.
Okay, thank you for that. So the only 2 recommendations, which is one, we don't refer it back to the executive. I think the executive 2 members are here now, so that it's been indirectly referred to them anyway, or we refer it but make recommendations. Now, I'm not sure what those recommendations would be, other than to ensure that all hard to reach groups or people who maybe have a negative impact are consulted, and fuller information should be required prior to making a decision of that. I'm not sure whether that takes us any further forward. I think the points have been made.
Chairman, would I be able to contribute towards perhaps that clarification at all? Would that be possible, just to make some sort of brief, just a couple of brief points?
If they're brief, I'm happy.
Okay, thank you so very much. I know we spoke about the options appraisal and the SLC, and it was mentioned in the call-in table that was circulated with the papers, and I'm sure that Kelvin will be only too happy to circulate that, but it was mentioned in there, and it's fully available. With regards to moving forward and avoiding situations like this and call-in, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is, if reports come before people and there's something in there you don't understand or you want extra information, please contact. I am always here, always available. Please call me. If I can provide those papers, I will. I want to avoid, the time and effort involved in this call-in and the extra strain and stress on officers and councillors as well. And I would beg you, to please, if there's anything that you see that you've got a query about, just contact me, I'm sure other members of the executive as well, will be only too happy. If you think you need some extra paperwork, you know, it's mentioned in the documents that circulated that you haven't got a full copy of it, then please do contact me or contact whoever it is, and I'm sure that that information will be provided. Nobody's trying to not provide information. Sometimes, you know, it's just that, you know, occasionally things are left out. So please, let's take this as a learning process to work closely and effectively together for the benefit of obviously for the residents, and, you know, as mentioned, their health and well-being, which is foremost in my mind. I know it's foremost in the leisure team's mind. You know, they really are committed and passionate about providing leisure facilities, and you know, we're at a really, really difficult time, and everybody's struggling, you know, with coming to terms with the pandemic and how things will look going forward. So that's just a plea from me. Thank you. Thank you.
And Liz, I absolutely agree with everything you say. Unfortunately, this is obviously before you were the portfolio holder. It had gone to executive, and the papers for the O&S to scrutinise it would have been outside the 5-day period. So we would have had no ability to scrutinise this or make recommendations. Now, that was unfortunate, and you know, it was just the way that the meeting structures. So we were unaware of the 5 days, and it just wouldn't work. Normally we get the papers, so if there is something, as a committee, we could then consider it. We couldn't on this occasion because our meeting was about a month away, and suddenly we're given the paper, and it's already, you know. So you're absolutely right. On this occasion, it fell through the gap through timings that we would have had to. It would have been a done deal. So, but I'm very conscious of the time. I suppose my only question left to my colleagues is, recommendation 2 talks about making recommendations to the executive as it sees fit. I don't think we need to make recommendations. I think we've raised our concerns, and I don't think we need to say our recommendation is that you consult, because we've raised that concern. I'm sure you've taken that on board, whether you agree with it or not. Are people happy as we have given the verbal concerns of lack of information and that bit of communication issues, that we leave that now with the executive through the deputy leader, and then we go through, I suppose it's number 2, but we've given verbal recommendation to the executive member involved. Are people happy with that? But rather than create another process to go to the executive and ask for a response, is everybody happy? If anybody isn't, just wave. Mary, was that a wave, or were you just waving at me?
No, Chairman, I was just about to say it's not quite clear. If you wouldn't mind, please, just repeating your proposed recommendation.
Okay, so the recommendation is that we don't refer it back to the executive, but we've made our verbal concerns. I know it says recommendations, you could use the word recommendations, to the executive as we see fit, and we've done that during this meeting, which is the 2 concerns. I don't think we need another process for those 2 issues. Does that make sense now, Mary?
It does, but I think that's a whole new recommendation, that instead of changing the words, just scrap all of those and create your own recommendation. But I would like to see the word process in there, because that is what this has been all about.
Okay, so if we have, but nevertheless, to make sure that processes are followed. Yep, you're happy with that? And relevant consultations are conducted. Are you happy with those additional words, Mary?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Right, is everybody happy with those? Does that make sense to our executive colleagues?
Chairman,
we've got a couple of minutes before we'll have to adjourn.
We have, so I want to be very quick. I mean, my own, I'm not entirely sure whether I'm able to vote on this anyway, so but if we're not doing a formal vote, it doesn't actually make much difference. But my own personal view is that what we're basically saying is that we do need to look at our governance, our system, our processes, which is basically under the headline of governance. We did have governance meetings, 2 or 3 of them, when the administration first came in 2019. So in the summer of 2019, we had 2 or 3 meetings. Those haven't carried on. And I think that, I personally think that we should be going back to something, because we've got a gap, which other members have raised a number of times in audit and in standards, an overlap between audit and standards. We're not really making any sort of progress whatsoever in improving the governance systems here. And I do think that we should, if we're making verbal recommendations, this is recommendation 2 that you're putting forward, isn't it? To resolve not to refer the decision back to the executive, but nevertheless to make such recommendations to the executive as we see fit, verbally, not in writing. That's what you're saying. So we're saying, does the committee agree with with recommendation 2? That's what we're doing. We're doing it verbally, but I would add that I think that it would be a good idea if we do encourage the executive to get the governance review back onto the table, not necessarily the system of committees or executive and leader as a sort of in the way it was originally envisaged as the purpose of the governance group, but to reinstate, reinvigorate whatever a review of governance, so that we can improve these matters, because it's not just this. It's on lots of occasions where
I'm really conscious of the time. So if we added the word that the governance and processes are followed, and I will leave the deputy leader at some stage to look at that meeting structure. I don't want us to get into that. So
it's in the works, Chair, anyway. It's only because we didn't want to overburden officers during this pandemic. So
the word, the governance and processes and the consultation are fully followed and explored. Okay, is everybody happy that we've now included that word governance?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got 3 minutes. I'll conclude the meeting. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to Kelvin, Tamsin and Liz for your preparation for this.
Thank you.
It is difficult and hopefully it hasn't been too painful, but it's not a blame game. It's about getting things better in the future, which hopefully this will do. Thank you, Democratic Services, for keeping this going during the period, and to the committee members for reading the papers and trying to understand the issues.
Yeah. Are we reconvening with the other?
Yeah, we will. I was just going to ask you, do we need a different login code?
No, come back on the same one.
Okay,
what time?
11:30 we're coming back.
Half
And
11.
as follows, if you want to give us a call at any stage for any clarification, just shout. But hopefully it is quite a simple.
No, that's fine. I came to understand it verbally from all of you, so I will take that away. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. 2 minutes to spare. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.